The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, and hold it. May we realize the end of the Tathagata. Good afternoon, everybody. This is day 2 of the November 2023 session, and Roshi is unable to be in the Zendo this afternoon. She's doing fine, but wasn't able to come, and so after lunch, true to form, she asked if I would do this talk today. And so I also, of course, threatened to run out the door. I'm just kidding. I didn't run out the door. That does seem somewhat representative of how practice can feel, though, where you feel like running out the door. And then something in you, just like something in me, doesn't do it. And then we go a little bit deeper and let go a little bit more. And so today I went to learnreligions.com because I wanted to talk a little bit more about the story of the Buddha. It was something that Roshi started talking about yesterday and reminded me of a conversation I had with a Sangha member before session, talking about the experience with Mara. And so those of you who are familiar with it, basically what happened is the Buddha sat down in meditation, and the distraction Dima, Mara, came forward and tried to pull him off his focus. And first he tried to entice his attention away with dancing women, and that didn't work. Siddhartha just kept sitting. And then Mara started throwing flaming arrows at him and scaring him with all kinds of demons. And Siddhartha just kept on sitting. And then he said, well, you know what? Mara said to Buddha, or Siddhartha, who's not yet realized he was Buddha, Mara said, you know what? You just can't do it. You weren't good enough. And Siddhartha put his hand down, touching the earth as witness, and realized that he was worthy. He would be able to open to the truth of reality. And then Mara disappeared. So that was a hook that really got Siddhartha. The other things didn't really deter him. He had already been practicing for a long time and was very determined. And those temptations weren't really enough to pull him off his practice, but the hook of you're not good enough, that got him. And he found a way through it, though. He searched inward and recognized this truth outside of himself, this insight that he was worthy, that the earth was witnessing that. He was one with the earth, and the earth was Buddha. And he hadn't quite fully awakened yet, but it was an important insight. And that can happen to us in practice too. It's really not so different from how it can feel in sesshin, in particular when we're doing this intensive sitting. And we can have, our identity, which really runs on its own circuit. There's some neuroscience that shows that who we think we are has this, it's a default mode network, maybe. No one's really sure. But it's an interesting idea in neuroscience that there's this default mode network where you have this sort of ongoing run of ideas that sort of creates the idea of self. And certainly in Buddhism, we recognize that there is a yada 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 that goes on, often all day long, it seems, in sesshin, with periodic breaks as we feel like our practice might finally be working when we get a break from the yada yada yada, but really our practice is working the whole time. But it just feels like that, this sense of self, that it has this intense hold, it feels like. And everybody has their own individual hooks. A lot of people have the you are not worthy hook, just like Siddhartha Gautama had. where we can be going and going and going, and then we just feel like, oh, I just can't do this. It's too hard. I'll never make it. I can do sesshin forever and it'll never make a difference. Stuff like that might sound familiar. I think it's a common hook that a lot of people have. But recognizing that we are worthy and that we are Buddha, even if it feels like we're just sort of brainwashing ourselves into believing that, it can really help as we're practicing. It goes back to having that faith and determination, which we all have or we wouldn't be here, but just sort of digging into that a little bit more. Remembering that that we can open just like Siddhartha did. And then, how do we do that? Well, each time we have one of these Mara figures before us, whatever it is, everybody's is different and unique, ultimately. You just keep going back to the practice. It seems like too easy to say, and it is too easy to say because it's very hard to do, but as we're going along in practice, as we're extending the breath, and we get some hook, and it's going to feel very real and very enticing. As we get those hooks, just going back to the breath, continuing the out breath. I often remind myself that it's about continuing the breath no matter what. So, halfway through the breath, you get a distraction. Well, my tendency is to be a perfectionist. So halfway through the breath, I get distracted. I'm like, well, it's a ruined breath then. So I'm going to quit and go start over. You just keep doing the breath. So halfway through the breath, you think about lollipops or whatever. That's fine. You just finish that breath no matter what to its very end. And then do it again and do it again and do it again. And then things start to let go. The default mode network or Mara weakens. And often it can be very fearful things that come up. Many people do feel like they are facing death when they are sitting, especially if they've been doing a lot of sesshin or it's towards the end of sesshin, this intense fear can come up. And the more we can open to that fear and just really let ourselves experience it, it makes a big difference in weakening it. It is ultimately fear of dying. It's the fear of dying to our idea of self, but that feels very real and concrete. So it feels very scary. There's a kind of fun quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face." So anytime we're able to just open up to that fear, if that's what's coming up for us, and just feel it even a little bit, it makes a really big difference in the end. So next time it comes up, it's a little bit weaker, you feel a little bit stronger. There are many times when fear came up for me and I just opened to it such that I was even shaking. And I know a lot of people have experienced that too. When they open to fear, they actually shake a little bit, and that's fine. It's part of the normal human response to fear. There's a biological component, and shaking can actually really help process it out, actually. But the main way to go about it is just the way Siddhartha did. Stuff came up, Mara came along, threw the flaming arrows, and he just kept sitting. The more you do that, the stronger you get, the deeper you get, and the more eroded away attachment to idea of self becomes. And it's almost, I have a friend who during sesshin said he almost felt like it was a video game. He would be going through sesshin and like missing an obstacle that normally would stop him in the past here, skipping another obstacle here, maybe going under a tunnel here and missing a problem over here. You do learn how to do sesshin over time. You have to be careful not to create a game out of it, right? Not to be a professional sesshin goer in a way, because it's easy to create habits in sesshin and sort of miss out on the opportunity to really open to what's going on in the very present moment. But he had a good point too, because it really is about each moment, as much as you can, letting go in each moment just as much as you possibly can, and not letting those habit patterns of distraction come in as much as you can. There is a story or a parable or a saying anyway, among the Bedouins that you never want to let a camel get his nose in the tent, because once he gets his nose in the tent, you're going to have a camel in your tent. And it's a lot like that when we're trying to do sesshin and we're doing long hours of sitting. And it's so easy to get distracted and think, well, you know what, if I think about ice cream for just a minute, it'll be fine. And then before we know it, we're on the racetrack down thinking about who knows what. So it's just something to keep in mind. We all learn how to sit by sitting, but these are some pointers that hopefully will be helpful. But the main thing is that it really can feel at certain points like Mara will be bringing up something that you can't possibly let go of. And that's always an illusion. But it's very common for it to come up and feel that way. But just to take witness, like Siddhartha did in the earth, and continue even when it feels like you can't, or it's impossible, to just continue anyway, you'd be really surprised at what happens. There's a wonderful quote from Zazen, who lived from 1802 to 1878. He said, "Coming and going, life and death, 1,000 hamlets, 1,000,000 houses. Don't you get the point? Moon in the water, blossom in the sky." The dog is scratching at the door. The point with that poem is to inspire us. We do practice in life with its comings and goings, life after life, if you believe in reincarnation. We have these manifestations in our life that come and go. And what's the truth? What's the abiding truth that's always there? I often remember quotes like this when I think or realize that I've gotten distracted, or realize that I've followed a merry path of attachment way too far. If there's ever too far on that kind of a path, I think just any time following the path of attachment leads to suffering, but I do it nevertheless, here and there. And so just remembering that forms arise, they fall away. How do we want to spend our time? How do we want to spend our life? Do we want to spend it chasing the latest and greatest, whatever that would be, a new job, a new house, a new person? Or do we want to sink down into the reality of what's right here, right now, experience that freedom and joy that we can then offer to others? That's just something that helps me. I remind myself of that when I can. So there's another quote that I also found really inspiring. It's from the book of Privy Counseling, which is written by the same unknown author as The Cloud of Unknowing. He was a Christian mystic. His texts, his books appeared first in Middle English in the 14th century. But he said, or she said, we don't know who it was, "But now I want you to understand that although in the beginning I told you to forget everything save the blind awareness of your naked being, I intended all along to lead you eventually to the point where you would forget even this, so as to experience only the being of God. It was with an eye to this ultimate experience that I said in the beginning, God is your being." So I'd like to leave us all with that mystery, that question. And if there are any specific questions or anything anyone wants to share, we can talk about that now. Well, it was good to speak with everyone today. Oh,
Shannon?
question?
Can you read that quote slowly again? Because I didn't really get it. It went by too fast.
Sorry,
Just slowly.
no problem. But now I want you to understand that although in the beginning I told you to forget everything, save the blind awareness of your naked being, I intended all along to lead you eventually to the point where you would forget even this, so as to experience only the being of God. It was with an eye to this ultimate experience that I said in the beginning, God is your being.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, well, with that, we'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.